Have you ever had a boss, a friend, or even a family member who couldn't stand being criticized? Who seemed to explode at the slightest hint of feedback, even when it was meant to help them? It's exhausting, right? Walking on eggshells around people like this can drain us. But what if that same personality had real power? As Robert Greene famously put it, you can judge a person's character by how they handle power. In the hands of a narcissist, power doesn't just corrupt, it becomes a weapon, a way to control and silence anyone who challenges them. Today, we'll look at a story from history that shows just how destructive narcissism can be, especially in leaders. We're talking about one of history's most notorious narcissists, Emperor Nero of Rome. His reign is a lesson in how unchecked vanity, ego, and defensiveness can turn a leader's power into a disaster for everyone around them. By looking at Nero and those who tried to stop him, we'll uncover lessons on leadership and why character matters as much as, if not more than, talent. Lesson 1. Narcissistic response to criticism. Let's start with something simple but powerful. How a person reacts to criticism says a lot about them. Narcissistic leaders take criticism as a personal attack. Instead of considering the feedback or learning from it, they get defensive, blaming everyone else. Nero is a prime example. From his earliest days as emperor, he'd respond to even the smallest suggestion or disagreement with rage and retaliation. Rather than taking feedback as a chance to grow, he saw it as a threat to his image, lashing out at anyone he thought was against him. This attitude is more than just annoying in a leader, it's downright dangerous. By refusing to listen, narcissistic leaders alienate their supporters, creating an environment where people are afraid to speak the truth. And as we'll see, that can lead to disastrous decisions. Lesson 2. Creation of a bubble. As Nero became more obsessed with his own image, he began to surround himself with people who would only tell him what he wanted to hear. This is what we call creating a bubble. In Nero's court, his advisors and servants would constantly flatter him, making him feel adored and respected, even when the opposite was true. He was so desperate for praise that he'd have servants clap for him in staged chariot races just to feel celebrated. When leaders surround themselves with yes men, they lose their connection to reality. They begin to believe their own hype, which only feeds their ego more. And as we'll see with Nero, this bubble can lead to a complete disconnection from the real world. Lesson 3. Nero's path to tyranny. Nero's journey from spoiled heir to tyrant is a tragic, yet classic, tale of what unchecked narcissism does to people. At first, Nero had some of the best philosophers, like Seneca, to guide him. But as he grew older, his vanity and sense of entitlement took over, and he dismissed anyone who didn't play along. He became fixated on controlling everything and everyone around him, growing more paranoid and ruthless. The turning point came when he began using his power to eliminate any potential threat he imagined. And for a narcissist, a threat doesn't mean someone plotting to overthrow you. It's anyone who challenges your ego or doesn't bow down. Nero's descent into cruelty was as much about his need for validation as it was about his need for control. Lesson 4. Leadership in crisis. Narcissistic leaders also tend to fall apart when faced with a real crisis. When the Great Fire of Rome broke out, Nero wasn't able to handle it responsibly. Instead of focusing on relief efforts or helping his people, he used the fire as an excuse for vanity projects, spending resources on grand new buildings rather than helping those who'd lost everything. And instead of taking responsibility for his poor response, he found a scapegoat, the Christians. This deflection led to years of persecution and division in Rome. Leaders who refuse to admit mistakes or show responsibility in tough times are dangerous. In Nero's case, his focus on self-interest over the public good led to avoidable suffering and intensified his people's distrust. Lesson 5. Modern parallels. It's easy to think that figures like Nero are relics of the past, but if we look around, we can see similar traits in leaders today. Narcissistic leaders often find their way into power by charming and captivating people, promising the world, and presenting themselves as larger-than-life figures. But once they're in control, their need for attention, their inability to accept criticism, and their self-centered decision-making come to the surface. It's a warning that these traits can be just as damaging now as they were in ancient Rome. Leaders who prioritize their ego over their duty create environments of fear and dishonesty, and that can be disastrous for everyone involved. Lesson 6. Stoic philosophy and resistance. Thankfully, history also gives us examples of people who didn't give in to narcissistic power. Some of the greatest thinkers of Nero's time, including Seneca and others in the Stoic opposition, resisted his tyranny. Stoic philosophy teaches self-control, humility, and placing the public good above one's own desires, all the qualities Nero lacked. These philosophers knew the dangers of unchecked power and were willing to stand up, even if it meant exile or death. This lesson in resilience and commitment to integrity shows that in the face of egotistical leadership, it's crucial to have people willing to speak the truth and uphold justice. They knew that Nero's power couldn't last, and they were proven right. Lesson 7. The need for virtuous leadership. In the end, Nero's rule collapsed because of his own weaknesses. His downfall was inevitable, as his lack of character and integrity poisoned his leadership. Leaders who only care about themselves might succeed for a time, but they almost always fail in the end. They erode trust, breed resentment, and, eventually, find themselves without anyone willing to support them. History reminds us that leadership without character isn't sustainable. We need leaders who are strong, but also humble. Leaders who listen and learn, who can handle criticism, and who focus on the good of the people, not just their own power. It's a lesson as relevant today as it was in ancient Rome. We have the choice to demand better and to value leaders who are driven by purpose and virtue, not ego. Now, we are about to end the video. Now it is time to change your life. Write down a comment and say that you want to change your life. No matter how difficult it is to change. I will reach each of your comment and feature one of the best comments on our channel. If you want to get a daily dose of unfiltered motivation, subscribe to our channel.